The air was electric with excitement as Nina Caldwell's art exhibition buzzed with conversation and admiration. It was a milestone event at the Canvas Collective, the artistic co-working space she had poured her heart and soul into. Ever since her mother passed away, leaving her a substantial inheritance of $215,000, Nina had dedicated herself to honoring her mother's memory through art. The show was meant to be a celebration of both her grief and growth. The gallery's bright, modern space was packed with guests, and the energy was intoxicating. But as the evening wound down and guests began filtering out, Nina's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a congratulatory text from a friend. Instead, a notification from her bank app stared back at her, cold and clinical. Her balance was almost zero. Heart pounding, she refreshed the page, certain it was a mistake. But no. Her high-yield savings account where she had carefully deposited her inheritance was completely drained. Confusion twisted into panic as she stumbled backward, her mind racing. It wasn't just a few dollars missing. It was everything. The very security her mother had intended to provide. Rushing out of the gallery, Nina dialed her husband Marcus Reed's number. His voice came through, smooth and detached, as if nothing had happened. "What's wrong?" he asked casually, the hum of a bar's background noise filtering through. Nina's voice trembled as she demanded answers, asking if he knew anything about the missing money. Instead of concern, Marcus responded with irritation, like her panic was a personal affront. "Relax," he sighed. "We all agreed you weren't using it. It's better off somewhere it can do real good." The words hit her like a slap. We? Who the hell was we? As Marcus's voice droned on, justifying his actions as if they were a mere accounting error, Nina's breath grew shallow. Her mind reeled. The inheritance had been left to her by her mother, strictly for her future. The one thing her mother had ensured Nina would have after her passing. And Marcus, the man she had trusted and built a life with, had simply taken it. Even worse, he spoke with a detached certainty, as if his actions were justified and rational. Marcus's next words sealed her fury. "It's not like you were using it, just sitting there hoarding it for no reason." His tone was dismissive, laced with condescension. Nina's grip tightened around her phone. This wasn't carelessness or a misunderstanding, it was betrayal. And by the sound of his voice, it wasn't just Marcus involved in this act of theft. The phrase, "we all agreed," rang in her ears like a warning bell. His family, his domineering mother Vivian, his scheming sisters Carla and Gwen, they had been talking about her money like it was their own. Nina hung up, her hands shaking, heart drumming painfully against her ribs. The bustling energy of the Canvas Collective had dissolved into a suffocating silence. She had spent months pouring her grief and creativity into her work, believing Marcus's support had been genuine. Now, her world felt fractured, and the people she trusted had conspired against her. As tears pricked her eyes, she made a decision. If Marcus thought her inheritance was nothing but a wasted resource, she was going to prove him wrong. And she would do it by uncovering every deceitful thread he and his family had woven. The days following the devastating revelation blurred into sleepless nights and frantic searches through her bank records. Nina couldn't erase Marcus's smug dismissal from her mind, his confident, careless assurance that her money was simply being used better. Her initial shock morphed into a focused rage. Nina isolated herself in her apartment, sifting through every digital receipt, transaction, and email she could find, but she needed help. That's when she called her cousin Elliot Kim, a cybersecurity specialist known for his meticulous skills and unwavering loyalty. Elliot's voice had gone icy when she explained the situation, and he immediately agreed to help her dig into the financial mess Marcus had left behind. Elliot's investigations uncovered a web of deceit more tangled than Nina had anticipated. Through a series of encrypted messages and hidden folders, Elliot discovered that Marcus had transferred the majority of her inheritance into a separate business account under his own name. But it didn't end there. The account wasn't just his. Marcus had made his mother Vivian and his sisters Carla and Gwen joint holders. They had registered the account under a vague name, the Reed Collective, claiming it was a venture meant to benefit the entire family. They had pooled her money with their own failing investments, desperate to fund a series of poorly planned business ideas. But the deception ran deeper than joint accounts. Elliot traced Nina's funds through multiple shell companies, some of which had been hastily registered under Carla's name. Several of these companies showed no activity beyond receiving money, then immediately transferring it elsewhere. The funds had been laundered through minor transactions that were designed to look like consulting fees or event management payments. Most of it had already been spent. Carla had used part of the money to pay off credit card debts and rent for a studio she pretended was a marketing firm. Gwen had invested in a boutique fashion line that never made it past the prototype phase. And Vivian, always looking for ways to expand her influence, had tried to purchase a commercial property to turn into a high-end craft supply store. Nina's stomach twisted with nausea as Elliot continued rattling off the list of transactions. They had torn through her inheritance as if it were free for the taking, masking their greed under the guise of family investments. But what disturbed Nina most was the proof Elliot uncovered of forged documents. Marcus had accessed her personal information to open a secondary credit line in her name, one she never authorized. This line of credit had been used to fund even more investments, spiraling into debt she never knew existed. With every piece of evidence Elliot gathered, Nina's anger hardened into something colder: determination. The worst blow came when Elliot presented her with a recording Marcus had forwarded to his mother. In the audio clip, Marcus's voice dripped with confidence as he discussed Nina's inheritance. "She's not using it. She's grieving. She'll do anything to avoid confrontation. This is just the push she needs to stop hoarding and start doing something meaningful." Hearing Marcus's voice so callously dismiss her pain and trust nearly broke her, but it also clarified her next steps. Elliot wasn't finished. He dug deeper, uncovering messages between Marcus and his sisters, discussing how best to convince Nina to sign over financial authority. When manipulation didn't work, they had resorted to outright theft, withdrawing funds without her knowledge. But what truly enraged Nina was the evidence of Vivian's attempts to declare her financially incompetent. There were drafted court documents Vivian had started preparing, complete with fabricated statements from therapists and witnesses Nina had never met. Her mother-in-law had been planning to claim Nina's grief over her mother's death had rendered her unfit to handle her own finances. Fury burned through Nina's veins. She felt the weight of betrayal from all directions. Marcus's lies, Vivian's power plays, Carla's scheming, and Gwen's desperation. They hadn't just stolen her money, they had conspired to strip her of her autonomy. The betrayal was as thorough as it was cruel. But instead of crumbling under the weight of their treachery, Nina found her resolve strengthening. Marcus and his family had underestimated her, believing her grief would render her helpless. They were wrong. She was done being the naive, trusting woman they thought they could exploit. With Elliot's help, Nina compiled everything: emails, recordings, transaction logs, and forged documents. She built a digital binder of evidence, ensuring that if Marcus tried to manipulate her again, she would have the truth on her side. What had started as desperation and disbelief was now a methodical pursuit of justice. Nina wasn't going to confront them just yet. She was going to gather every piece of their betrayal and make sure there was no way they could wriggle out of their crimes, and when the time was right, she would strike. Nina's suspicions had already hardened into certainty, but what Elliot uncovered next shattered whatever fragments of trust she still clung to. Digging deeper into Marcus's financial activity, Elliot stumbled upon a string of wire transfers and payments made to a woman named Sophie Harper, an event planner based in Los Angeles. At first, Nina thought Sophie was just another business contact, someone Marcus might have worked with through his supposed entrepreneurial endeavors, but the frequency and size of the transactions told another story. One particularly damning payment of $5,800 was marked as a gift, a diamond necklace, accompanied by a lavish weekend getaway at a coastal resort. The dates coincided with times when Marcus claimed to be away on business trips. Nina's stomach lurched as she realized Marcus hadn't just stolen her money for his own gain. He had been using it to fund a double life. Elliot continued his relentless investigation, tracing connections between Marcus and Sophie. What he uncovered left Nina reeling. Sophie wasn't just a mistress. She was listed as a co-owner on one of the accounts Marcus had created with Nina's stolen inheritance. Worse, Sophie had been led to believe that Marcus was an independent investor, flush with funds from a successful venture he claimed to be launching with his family's support. The lies were intricate and well-practiced. Emails exchanged between Marcus and Sophie spoke of their future, of investments to be made and vacations to be taken. Sophie had even contributed some of her own savings to a business fund Marcus assured her would yield lucrative returns. Nina's chest tightened with every word she read, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and despair. The extent of Marcus's deceit stretched beyond personal betrayal. Elliot uncovered multiple shell companies hastily registered under Sophie's name, probably at Marcus's request. They were nothing more than facades, empty LLCs designed to funnel Nina's money through a labyrinth of false investments. But it wasn't just Sophie who had been deceived. Through meticulous searches, Elliot discovered that Marcus had also been scamming other victims. Artists, freelancers, and hopeful entrepreneurs he had met through the Canvas Collective. Posing as a financial consultant, he convinced them to pour their savings into investment schemes that never existed. When they tried to pull out, Marcus claimed their funds were tied up in long-term investments or hidden behind non-disclosure agreements. But the worst revelation came when Elliot broke through the final layer of Marcus's deceptions. While combing through Marcus's private files, Elliot unearthed a secondary identity Marcus had constructed over the years. Operating under the name Ryan K. Sellers, Marcus had built an entirely separate life. He maintained a LinkedIn profile, complete with a fabricated resume as a financial advisor specializing in creative ventures. Several of the shell companies Elliot discovered were registered under this alias. The resume boasted accomplishments Marcus could never claim, networks of connections that were nothing but falsehoods. Nina's hands trembled as she scrolled through the digital evidence, her disbelief transforming into fury. Elliot's final discovery felt like the ultimate betrayal. Under his alias, Marcus had used Nina's identity to open a line of credit worth nearly $80,000. Nina's signature had been forged, her personal information manipulated to build up debt she hadn't authorized. Marcus hadn't just stolen her inheritance, he had weaponized her own identity against her. Worse, Elliot discovered that Vivian had helped Marcus craft the fraudulent paperwork, even enlisting the help of a notary friend to validate the documents with a forged stamp. Vivian's betrayal was complete. Not only had she enabled her son's theft, but she had actively participated in the scheme. Nina's grief for her mother had never fully healed, but now it had been compounded by a different kind of mourning. She had trusted Marcus with her life, her dreams, and her future, and he had repaid her loyalty by stripping her of everything she held dear. But if Marcus thought he had outsmarted her, he was mistaken. Every revelation only strengthened Nina's resolve. She wasn't just fighting to reclaim her inheritance, she was fighting to reclaim her dignity, her autonomy, and her name. As Elliot's investigation continued, Nina steeled herself for what was to come. Every piece of evidence Elliot compiled became another brick in the wall Nina was building to protect herself. Screenshots of conversations, copies of forged documents, bank statements and fraudulent contracts. All of it was saved and catalogued. Nina was no longer the grieving woman Marcus thought he could control. She was awake, aware, and ready to strike back. And when she did, she would make sure Marcus and his entire family understood the full extent of her fury. With Elliot's guidance, Nina crafted a meticulous plan. It would take time, patience, and nerves of steel, but Nina was prepared to see it through. She wouldn't confront them yet, not until she was absolutely certain she had everything she needed to bring them down. Nina wasn't just planning revenge. She was planning justice. Nina's patience had stretched thin, but she knew her timing had to be flawless. After weeks of gathering evidence with Elliot's help, she had compiled an airtight case against Marcus, Vivian, Carla, and Gwen. The sheer volume of their deceit was staggering, but now Nina was ready to face them all. She arranged a meeting at the Canvas Collective, under the pretense of discussing their so-called family business. Marcus arrived first, his cocky grin plastered across his face, still confident he could charm his way out of any situation. Carla and Gwen followed, their expressions veering between nervousness and annoyance, while Vivian strode in with the overbearing authority she always projected. Nina's fingers trembled as she set her laptop on the sleek wooden table, its screen open to a meticulously organized slideshow of damning evidence. Marcus's eyes flicked toward the display, a flicker of unease crossing his face before he quickly masked it with arrogance. "All right, Nina. What's all this?" he drawled, leaning back in his chair with feigned indifference. But Nina didn't miss the tightness around his eyes, the way his fingers fidgeted at his sides. She launched into her presentation with a calmness she didn't feel, her voice steady but sharp. "This is everything you and your family have stolen from me," she said, eyes locking onto Marcus's stunned gaze. "Every unauthorized transfer, every forged document, every dollar you funneled into your fake ventures." Click by click, Nina unveiled the evidence Elliot had compiled. Screenshots of Marcus's wire transfers to Sophie Harper, transactions under his fake identity Ryan K. Sellers, and fraudulent business accounts registered under Gwen and Carla's names. Vivian's face drained of color when Nina displayed the forged documents, complete with the false notary stamp provided by her old friend. "I have copies of everything," Nina continued. "All of your names are on these accounts. Every time you withdrew money, every time you signed your names. Thinking I wouldn't notice." Carla broke first, her shoulders slumped, tears brimming in her eyes. I didn't know how deep it went," she stammered, her voice cracking. "Marcus said it was just a loan, that you'd be fine with it once we explained." Gwen, too, looked rattled, her tough facade crumbling under the weight of Nina's accusations. But it was Marcus's reaction Nina had anticipated most. His calm shattered, anger twisting his features as he lunged to his feet. "You can't do this, Nina. You're blowing everything out of proportion. It was all for the family." His voice rose with every word, a desperate, fraying edge creeping into his tone. Nina met his fury with cold clarity. "You took everything I had, Marcus. Everything my mother worked her entire life to give me, and you wasted it, stole it, lied about it." Her voice was steel, cutting through his protests like a knife. Vivian tried to interject, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're just being dramatic, Nina. This could have been handled quietly. You should have come to us instead of playing detective." But Nina had no patience left for their gaslighting. "Quietly? You mean so you could manipulate me further? So you could declare me incompetent and steal everything legally?" Nina shot back, her eyes blazing with fury. "You've been planning this for months, all of you." She saw the realization dawn on their faces, their web of lies unraveled, their control shattered. Vivian stammered, trying to salvage what little power she still thought she held. But it was too late. Just then, the doors to the Canvas Collective swung open, and two suited men entered, their expressions grim. Elliot had coordinated their arrival perfectly. "Miss Caldwell, we're here to follow up on your report." one of the investigators said, his eyes sweeping over the frozen family members. Marcus's face paled, his bravado evaporating as the agents produced documentation of their investigation. Marcus Reed, Vivian Reed, Carla Reed, Gwyn Reed. You are all under investigation for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The room descended into chaos. Carla sobbed openly. Gwen spluttered excuses, and Vivian shouted threats of lawsuits and countersuits. Marcus tried to bargain, then blame, his words growing desperate as the investigators led him away. But Nina didn't flinch. Her composure remained intact, her eyes fixed on Marcus as he was escorted out of the building, his cries of innocence already sounding hollow. The air felt different when they were gone. Lighter, cleaner. Nina's hands were still shaking, but not from fear. It was from the sheer force of her resolve. She had fought for her voice, for her mother's legacy, and for her own independence. And she had won. The aftermath of the confrontation left Nina both exhausted and exhilarated. Marcus, along with Vivian, Carla, and Gwen, faced charges for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy, their elaborate schemes now exposed to the harsh scrutiny of the law. Marcus's desperate pleas for forgiveness fell on deaf ears. The courtroom proceedings were grueling, but Nina remained resolute, her strength fortified by the truths she had fought so hard to reveal. When the final verdict was delivered, Marcus received a substantial prison sentence, while Vivian and Carla were fined heavily and placed under probation. Gwen, the least involved, received a lesser sentence but cut all ties with her family, recognizing their toxic influence. Free from their manipulation, Nina finally allowed herself to breathe. She sold the house she had shared with Marcus and purchased a cozy, modern condo overlooking Seattle's waterfront, a space entirely her own. With the remaining inheritance salvaged and the debts cleared, Nina poured her energy into rebuilding her life. She resumed her work as a graphic designer, this time launching her own freelance business from the Canvas Collective, where her journey to justice had truly begun. The creative community embraced her resilience, and her projects flourished with newfound inspiration. Nina's confidence grew with every completed piece, her success rooted firmly in her own talent and determination. She no longer sought validation from others, least of all from those who had tried to strip away her autonomy. Instead, she built her future on her own terms. The betrayal had scarred her, but it had also sharpened her, turning pain into power. As she gazed out over the shimmering water from her studio, Nina knew she had reclaimed not only her inheritance, but her life, and she would never allow anyone to take that from her again. The story of Nina Caldwell teaches a powerful lesson about resilience, self-reliance, and reclaiming one's power. Betrayed by those she trusted most, her husband Marcus, his manipulative mother Vivian, and his scheming sisters Carla and Gwen, Nina learns that blind loyalty can be exploited and that even family can be driven by greed. But her journey isn't just about uncovering deception, it's about reclaiming her autonomy and finding strength within herself. Through meticulous investigation and unwavering determination, Nina turns her pain into purpose. She proves that betrayal, while devastating, doesn't have to define or destroy her. The lesson is clear. Trust is precious and should be given wisely, but even when it's shattered, it's possible to rebuild. Nina's courage in facing the truth and fighting for justice illustrates the importance of trusting one's instincts and never letting others undermine personal worth. Her story is a testament to resilience, showing that reclaiming control over one's life is possible, even after the deepest betrayals. Above all, Nina's journey reminds us that empowerment often comes from within, forged through hardship and the decision to stand up for oneself, against all odds.